What's going on, everyone? Hope everyone's having a decently good summer vacation as we're starting off the end of May. I wanted to make somewhat of a weekly series, or try to, just talking about the different film franchises that I started watching, 5 or 6 years ago each summer since. And just looking at it through nostalgia and maybe a bit of rose-tinted glasses, just because I was introduced to many of these films when I was a kid, just thought they were cool. A lot of details, are probably already common knowledge, or you can easily go on YouTube or IMDb to look it up. I may look up some here while we're discussing it, because I watch almost all my movies once a year. But the first set I want to talk about is Jaws and the franchise that followed that. It's one of my two favorite films, the other being Alien, but both of them have so much influence over the film industry, and ideally, I want to make more videos talking about films, because this channel, I wanted to make partially about film and filmmaking. So, Jaws introduced essentially the summer blockbuster to moviegoers and the industry. And what I mostly remember about the film, what made it so great for me, was as a kid, I was always wanting to see, okay, when's the shark going to pop back up? How much are we going to see of it? Do we see just the fin? Okay, somebody going to be killed? Okay. And the music heavily influenced a lot of that tension.
It's all psychological.
And, the acting was great. It's hard to follow something like the Indianapolis speech by Robert Shaw, one of the great all-time actors. All the elements of that movie worked so well. The acting, the dialogue, so much credit to Carl Gottlieb for writing just tremendous dialogue in the first two. I think he helped with the third one. And now, looking back, trying to compare how I view the film to what I saw when I was a kid, now that I know a whole lot more about filmmaking, in retrospection, it was for the better. They had to use barrels when the mechanical shark wasn't working. And that's one of the great things about making films, is when you're limited in what you can do, you're forced to get creative. And I think I've talked about this before in one of the other videos. And a lot of times that forced creativity can end up just being better. You don't always have to see the monster. That kind of dilutes what makes it scary. And I think if they had originally been able to show the monster how Spielberg originally envisioned it, I don't think it would have been nearly as good, if really good at all. But it was, and it is what it is, like all the movies. And I try to see the positives in each of them. Acknowledge making a movie is not an easy task, and a lot of things can go wrong, and a lot of ideas that may be good end up getting shot down in favor of, I don't know, whatever the studio executives want. But that was a big part of why I think, and I think a lot of people agree with it, why Jaws has that lasting impact. And the re-released Blu-ray that included the documentary of The Shark Is Still Working, if you haven't picked it up, do yourself a favor, because every little bit of information you can get about a film, I think, enhances one's appreciation of it. I know it does for me. And Jaws 2, I thought, was a good film. It was the last Jaws film that I was introduced to in the series, because I actually didn't know it existed. I think I saw the first one first, and then Jaws the Revenge, which I thought was the second film, but I was 7 years old. I didn't know any better. Give me a break on that. And then I learned that, oh, there's a Jaws 3 that was made earlier. It was in 3D. And it wasn't until I think my grandmother let me know once that it was a late night movie on TBS or something that they were showing Jaws 2. I was like, oh, okay. When I finally saw Jaws 2, I accepted everything in it. I learned that, Roy Scheider wasn't too thrilled about doing that one, but at the time I didn't know that, and I couldn't tell from watching it because he's a good actor, and I thought he and everybody else did a fine job, and which they actually didn't show the shark a whole lot more in the beginning of that one, even though they could, because it's still good to follow that structure of, don't show it too much or it becomes pointless. But as was discussed in the making of Jaws 2, the documentary on the DVD, it was more about the characters, more about the Brody family. And I think that was a good direction to go in, because it's good to have character development. And not just looking at that from an audience perspective, but if you're going to learn how to write characters and how to develop a story and good pacing and what they did for that film, it's important to learn about characters, and that's a good example. Now, granted, they still had problems with their mechanical shark that had to be rebuilt because the original one was just sitting out on the back lot. Some people didn't like all the kids, day sailing. They thought the kids were dumb. I was like, no, they're written how kids would be at that time, and it's a movie. So I don't think the dialogue was that far-fetched from reality. And then, once it popped in Jaws 3, this is where the enthusiasm pretty much takes a nosedive. And I know that I have a controversial opinion, and I think Jaws 3 was worse than Jaws 4. But hear me out. Here's why. One, because, like I said, rose-tinted glasses, and I was introduced to the fourth one so early on before I knew about the third one. So let's keep that in mind. The 3D gimmick, I guess, that they were trying to include in that to try to make things pop out, it was what it was at the time, and that's what studios were pushing for, 3D effects. It didn't work then. I don't know why they thought a resurgence of 3D in the late 2000s, around 2008 to 2012, would suddenly work again, because it doesn't. It might have worked for films like Avatar, and that made sense, but you gotta learn the lesson. 3D doesn't work for a shark film, and I haven't really noticed a good shark film since the 21st century rolled around. But that's just me. When I first saw Jaws 3, I thought it was cool to see, oh, we got dolphins now, and I love dolphins. I originally wanted to be a marine biologist when I was really young. That might have been influenced a bit from watching Jaws, because I just found sharks and everything under the sea fascinating. Now, looking up the trivia details and the behind-the-scenes facts, because I didn't know if there was a making of Jaws 3 documentary that existed anywhere, and I think the HBO one that I saw on YouTube was more of just a promo. God bless Joe Alves, the production designer on the first film, and I think even on the second film, and the second unit director on there. He had a tough job, so I'm not holding it against him that the film wasn't great. He did what he had to do and things he wanted to do. Just when you're working with water, it just may not happen. Now, also the acting, parts were better than others, obviously, and some of the actors were better than others. I think the most unconvincing person in the film was, and I'm sorry for saying this against a fellow Houstonian, was Dennis Quaid. Sorry, it was like, he was always trying to be so intense and have this really intense glare at everything he was looking at. And it kind of made things seem a little weird in each scene and the interactions. Like, But again, that's just me. Now, it was also Leah Thompson's first feature film, and she was a natural, and I didn't know that was her first film. And she's a great actress and has gone on to do great films since then, especially Back to the Future, we might be talking about next week. But also, upon first watching the film, seeing a perspective of somebody inside the shark's mouth, I was like, oh, okay, that's one other thing that they hadn't tried yet. I don't think it had been done in the film history before that, not to my knowledge, at least not in the Jaws films. And so it's cool to try new things, at least. So I give them that. But really, the moments of 3D that they try to make things pop out at the camera, it was a gimmick, and 3D doesn't really work for a lot of people's eyes. It didn't work for my eyes, because even when I'm watching a film and they want me to be immersed in it, but I can see the outline of the frame, and it's like, yep, this is just a film on a screen. So when they converted the film also to 2D so they could show it in normal screenings, and it left the kind of haze and out of focus perspective on the edges of either people or the edges of the screen, it's pretty noticeable nowadays. Back when we had VHS and just watching things on CRT televisions, it's like, okay, you accept it for what it is. Okay, finally, we're on to what many consider to be the worst film of the series and one of the worst films of all time. Not necessarily disagreeing, but here's where I'm coming from. I saw Jaws the Revenge when I was 7 years old, and at the time I thought it was really cool. And now, looking back, there's really only 2 deaths in the entire film, not counting the re-released international European version, which, let me talk about that really quick. The version that I saw came on TV in 1992, and it included what I did not know were deleted scenes. Mike and Jake, playing their instruments and singing on the porch, a bit of an extra anecdotal story told by Ellen Brody to Mike as they're sitting at the dinner table, and a couple extra shots of the shark swimming by the camera or swimming away. I didn't know that those were meant to be deleted scenes. I don't know why they were when the film came on TV. How was I supposed to know? And also the narration in the beginning. You could argue either way on that, whether it was necessary or not. And the music that was reworked into Jaws the Revenge, taking from John Williams' score, was fine. It was what it was. The score from Jaws 3, I didn't realize toward the big climax scene of the film. I hadn't listened to much classical music before then, so I didn't realize, oh, that's taken directly from Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, the second movement. So that's cool, because John Williams' music is heavily influenced by Stravinsky, especially the Jaws theme. You can hear that in Rite of Spring especially. Anyway, I thought the acting in Jaws the Revenge, especially from Mario Van Peebles, great actor. He wrote the part of Jake, and he played it beautifully. And Lance Guest, he had come off from doing The Last Starfighter a couple years earlier, and I thought he did a fine job. And just about everybody else. I mean, Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody, she hadn't been acting since Jaws 2, in a film at least, and so that kind of fell flat maybe. But I always said, and I still maintain, if you take the shark out of that film, then it's a nice little made for TV family drama. I think it still is. Learning that Michael Caine earned a nice paycheck that bought him a house just from doing that film, and he wasn't all excited about it, but I couldn't tell when I first saw it because I didn't really know who Michael Caine was. Like I said, rose-tinted glasses. I think if the deleted scenes were included in the releases now, I think it would have made a couple of scenes, or at least the character development, a little more solid. It would have made a little more sense, but that's just from my perspective. So I'm sure there's a lot of other details I'm forgetting from this series, but all those facts are most likely on IMDb. And we can discuss it if you want to leave a comment down below, why you think one's better than the other, why you think one scene was bad, cinematography or the editing. Some of the shots of the shark going back down into the water, I understand why they slowed the film speed down a bit to make it a little more dramatic, but there was a couple of shots which I couldn't tell which fin was the tail, which was the dorsal. They looked almost the same, with that thing being on the crane. Just like, why would the tail be the last thing to go back in the water if it's going straight down? It's like, that looked really bad. Not as bad as some of the overall things in Jaws 3, but really bad. And I could argue, I think I heard that some of the shots in the European release, technically speaking, the way the film itself was released in the shot, you could see part of the crane underneath the shark, which, also learning the detail that the writers of the fourth film hadn't seen Jaws 2 or 3. Yeah, that puts to bed why the confusion happened, like why this incident from Jaws 2 or Jaws 3 or these people are not in the fourth film. At first I thought it was intentional, continuity issues, but no, they just didn't watch it, which that's a shame. Given how tough a director's job is and the fact that they were given the green light knowing how ridiculous parts of that film were going to be, but they wanted to try to see if they could make it work, I give Joseph Sargent props for that. Because, the fact that you get to make a Jaws film, you get to do something with a big mechanical shark, who wouldn't think that that's cool? Who wouldn't want to do that? And hindsight is always 20/20. That's a given. So I can forgive some of that. Not saying it's a great film. It's not. I'm not going to argue with anyone who says it's a bad film. But I think, the A for effort on all the actors in all the films. They don't have bad actors for the most part. That's where my thoughts on that series are. I kind of just leave, the third and fourth film on in the background while I'm doing something else. But, you make a marathon out of these things. Just have a franchise on for a day. And that's what I do for the week. So next week, probably be talking about Back to the Future, or at least just a retrospect from an audience's perspective. So anyway, this I think was getting back into the pixeled moment territory because these films have been digitized now, so it does count as pixels. So anyway, if you'd like to discuss anything, leave a comment down below. I'm all for talking about the films. If you'd be so kind as to hit a like and maybe the subscribe button, I'd greatly appreciate that too, so you can keep up with the summer movie marathon. Because I don't know if a lot of networks are doing that anymore. But hey, I don't see why I can't. So until next time, be excellent, and I will see y'all next week.